Welcome to the AFT Construction Podcast today, and we are beyond fortunate to have Shea McGee with us today. Welcome, Shea.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I know it's been busy. You've been busy this last year, and for those of you that know Studio McGee, Shea. She's the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Studio McGee, and I know that you have an amazing following. And the reason I know that is because I post just a little notification in my story that, hey, we're going to have Shea on, and the feedback was just incredible because we do have a lot of designers that follow us on social media as well as our podcast. So they were super excited you're coming on today, Shea. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk industry talk. It's great.
Yeah, it is nice. So let's start here. The one thing I get a lot, Shea, which I'm sure you do too, a lot of people think this overnight success. They look at your platform, the Studio McGee, you have all these different jobs, projects, they're beautiful, that it's this overnight success, but they don't realize where we started from. So take us back to what inspired you for your first renovation at your home in Orange County back in 2010.
Yeah, so I always laugh at that when people say that we were an overnight success. I know that it's been a quick road to where we have landed currently, and I still feel like we have so much more to accomplish. But really, the story of how it all started, was like 8 or so years ago, when Sid and I really first got married, and I started decorating our first apartments, and I studied communications with emphasis in public relations. And so something completely different. I love and have always loved design, but I am not an artist and was really scared off of taking the coursework for interior design school. So I graduated something completely different, worked in advertising and PR, and really those skills have served me well once I started my business, but I couldn't scratch that itch. It was just like the design part of me was always there. And so we decorated our first couple of apartments. We bounced around for a little bit. And then we, in about that 2010 time, we were living in Orange County. And so the market was hit really, really bad, the real estate market. And so Sid and I just scraped together everything we could to put a down payment on. Well, we could only afford a foreclosure. It was a short sale, and it had 3 mortgages out on it. And we had lost out on so many houses because everyone, and especially investors, were trying to snatch up those houses, and we couldn't put down an all cash offer for like these investment opportunities. And so we just kept losing out, and we were getting so defeated. And I wanted so badly. I had started taking classes at a local community college, design classes, and I wanted so badly to put what I was learning to the test and really prove to myself that I could do this. And having a place of your own, being in rentals, the carpet is always just like gross. And no matter, even if the owner lets you paint a wall, it's still just not your own. And so I was so excited to get in, and like Sid can attest, probably within like a week, I was like already like, all right, Sid, like start demoing some things. Let's get to the kitchen. So I really probably tricked Sid into spending too much money on an investment in my business. I kept telling him, like, if we do this, like if we make over this house, it's going to be such a great portfolio builder for me. And so that's how we got started. And it's Orange County. In that era, everything is Tuscan, right? So it's brown on brown on brown, which I like neutrals, but it was a look that was not appealing to my design senses. And so it had a good layout, and I wanted to show that this light and airy aesthetic could be derived from something that was very, very boring. And I knew early on that like a light and airy aesthetic was mine. Did I know much beyond that? No, I had just been studying magazines and design books forever. So I started with this kitchen, and it was like Carrara marble and subway tile backsplash and white cabinets. And at the time, that was really unusual in our neighborhood. Like people, we were like this spectacle for neighbors. So they would, like, oh my gosh, it's white in there, huh? And then they kind of saw as it came together how beautiful it really was. And I started consulting at that time. And I say consulting, but like really it was just like people asking me to come over to their houses and give them my opinion on things. That really got me started until one day my sister-in-law said, hey, I have this friend who needs a little bit of help in her house. And that was like my first paying job, was this referral through my sister-in-law to someone that I knew but didn't know well, and but they lived in our neighborhood, and it was a styling job, and that was my first real project. But I'd say that like our kitchen and remodel of our house really gave me the opportunity to just kind of show that I had any sort of design sensibility before I started calling myself a designer.
Well, I think that's really valuable insight. I mean, Shea, before we dive into that first project and how you utilize the content of your own house, you had talked about your career up to that point. You were in public relations, communications, advertising, PR. And what I found is that there's advantage to also have an experience outside of your bubble, right? Because you went through it now. I mean, one thing that you're very successful on, anyone that follows Studio McGee, I mean, your PR and advertising is phenomenal, right? Your content's there. And so we'll get into this later in the conversation too, but one of the terms in sales is this loss leader, right? To take a project, to build that. And as you're studying and working on your own project, you're looking at, okay, telling Sid, let's remodel this. This is content, right? I can leverage this content. I know relations. I know, how to PR. So by having this content now, it's a work in progress, and I can bring people, and that's how we're going to start our business. And little did you know, it would take you now. So, tell us about that first job and how exciting that was, as you start now to get that first lead.
Yeah. So loss leaders, I mean, you had mentioned like a loss leader. I think like the first several years of my career and our business was a loss leader. It was just like take on as much as we could to get the experience to prove that we could do what we wanted to do and build our portfolio. That first job, of course, I was so nervous, so excited. It was a super small project, but something about it just gave me the confidence to keep going. I think that I hadn't started it was that first project that gave me the idea to start a business Instagram. So like, I had, a private Instagram with just like a couple hundred followers. And I was documenting our house. And then I posted one photo from this first project, and, that small following was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, wow, people are a lot more excited about this than any other like silly vacation photo I post, right? So maybe I should start my own Instagram. And this was really early days when there weren't a lot of designers that had Instagram accounts like strictly for their business. And so that first project, I learned a lot just from like, I have to come up with a rate. I need a business name. I need to figure out how to invoice people, just like all of those first steps, and estimating how many hours it would take, how much was it going to cost. All those things you really can't learn in school. You just kind of have to do it. And so I think that first job kind of forces you to figure out all of those first steps into running a business.
Yeah. So did you have any help with that? I mean, if you're thinking about anyone starting a business, now being in it for 10 years, you understand the nuance and relations and, the billing and cash flow and so forth.
Yeah.
Did you have anyone in your network that you had built relationships with to help you that? Or did you just kind of trial by fire figure it out as you went along?
No, I am like terrible about asking for help. And so I like didn't even ask Sid for help, but like Google was my best friend always. It was just like, oh, like Google an interior design invoice and then figure it out. I just always have had I'll figure it out mentality, and I don't like asking for help, which has proven to be, it was challenging in the early days as we were trying to start Studio McGee. So we started Studio McGee in 2014, and we had to hire our first employees and then grow from there, and just relinquishing control when it was just me alone doing everything was a challenge. So no, I didn't ask for help. I should have probably. It would have made it a lot easier, but I just made things up as I went along.
Hey, that's okay. There's an advantage to learning. I mean, one thing is when you're experiencing yourself and going through those growing pains, right? You don't make that same mistake twice. If you made it, you figure out quickly. So how did social media, you mentioned that, this was early on with social media, and of course you've leveraged that today. When did you really see social media, Instagram, really be an opportunity for you to seek after to help build your business from a marketing perspective?
When did I see Instagram be? Well, very early. So it was like right after my first project that I launched Shea McGee Design, and that was my Instagram account. And I really didn't have other designers to pattern myself off of. So I used other businesses, and other, like fashion bloggers were starting to really utilize Instagram. And so I followed what they were doing, which was posting consistently every single day, and really establishing an aesthetic on their feed so that you could go to their feed and see that, like, without looking at pictures individually, you could get a sense for their style as a whole, to really set the tone, because I realized that people were going to my Instagram page more than they were going to like my website. And so it needed to act as a portfolio to speak to who I was as a designer. And so I had to stretch my content really far, because I didn't have 100 projects to post from. And so, it was a lot of behind the scenes and progress pictures, and just learned how to take photos so that I could do all of that work myself, because I did see that, like, good photos really elevated your brand. And I knew that very early on, and maybe that was my marketing background, but just seeing that you could really establish how people felt about you within like 2 seconds of them coming to your profile was really important.
I love that, because, most people don't realize, we think about website, and website is important for landing page. But one thing that Instagram is, it's a working resume, right? It's ongoing. It's something you can update easily. And it's something where people that follow you, they kind of get to know Shea, right? They get to know your personality. They get to know your style, your aesthetic, your personality. And there's an attraction there where people look at that and say, hey, I can relate, or I like what she's doing. And you mentioned, in the early days in Laguna, which is very similar to Scottsdale, everything was Tuscan, right? It's dark, it's heavy, and for you coming in with a new aesthetic where you really understood your aesthetic. Now, you mentioned that's really important for young designers. So why should young designers, builders, understand their aesthetic and really strive to achieve that?
Yeah, I think that early, when you're first starting, you have a sense of what your aesthetic is by way of following other people. And so you're patterning yourself after other designers to then discover your own aesthetic. But I think the designers that are incredibly successful carve their own way over time. When you're first starting, there's a whole combination of factors that kind of influence what you're doing. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that clients just boss you around because they don't trust that you have any sort, because you don't have any experience. So it's hard to trust what you're saying. So in the early days, I did have a style, but I think that I was really heavily influenced by what my clients were pushing me to do. and I didn't know to have how to have those conversations like, trust me, this couch is going to be great, because they didn't have any reason to trust me because there wasn't a big portfolio yet. And so I was able to really establish my aesthetic. And I think that you have to be patient I know my builder for my house, like, he often laughs, like, sometimes you just got to build a few ugly houses, to put food on the table. And I feel like that that happens kind of. I don't say that any of our projects were ugly, but there were a lot of decisions that were dictated by clients early on. And then each project, you get a little bit more freedom. And then you guys can start kind of hitting your stride of like, oh, this project really represented me as a designer, because I was able to really help set the tone for the whole house and all of the selections. This really represented not only me, but it represented our client. But like, we came to that place together instead of me acting as like an assistant. And I can see that that just happens over time, but you have to work really hard to get yourself there, because it is easy to just, clients will always just show you pictures of other people's work. And so if you're always stuck in that mode and you don't push yourself out of that bit by bit, then you will just be stuck in that pattern.
Well, I love that you said that, Shay. I mean, that's really impactful. I think for any business, you relate it to the builder. Sometimes you have to build some ugly houses. Not that they're ugly, but you have to kind of start building this business. And I think most of us as people, and social media has accelerated this, we become impatient, right? Because you use that word patience. At the beginning, you want full control, but as you're building your business and as you're building your aesthetic and your style and trying to get that freedom that you mentioned, it takes some time, right, to get that. But was there a time? I mean, you were patient through the process. You understood, okay, I'm going to seek these jobs, the lost leaders. I'm going to start building this. Social media is a way where I can now market this. Was there a turning point in your career, or with Studio McGee, maybe a project, maybe a time when you finally felt like, I have the freedom? We have the name, we have the reputation, and now we're going to go conquer.
Yeah. So early days, I mean, I definitely feel like the Modern Mountain Home project that we did, that was like our first full project, full home project as Studio McGee. So I actually worked with that client in San Clemente when we lived there. They were a neighbor, and I did a couple of rooms in their house. It wasn't a huge project. And then they decided to build this big house when we moved to Utah, and asked me to design it. And because we had worked together and they had become friends, they trusted me. And this was this large budget, beautifully designed architecture. I knew that was my opportunity. Like, this was an opportunity to make a name for myself. And so, I mean, it was a staff of like 2 people at the time, and my design assistants worked really, really hard on every single corner, and they trusted us. And the results, I think, really put us on the map. Besides just like, oh, they have like this social media following, it was like, oh, like we were on Architectural Digest, and it was a moment for us. And that project is still referred to this day. It has had staying power. And I just think that was like a really big turning point for us. And then from there, we started to be able to be a little bit pickier about our clients, just a little bit. And then we have continued to be more selective about our projects. We could say, oh, we're only doing full homes now. Or we could set budget parameters, things that we weren't able to do before and didn't want to, quite frankly, because we just needed all of the
business
work. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, you said some things that are really important. There's a relationship side of our industry, especially in design. One thing that I think most people don't realize with design is good designers, right? There's a feeling, there's an emotion, there's a creativity. So when people come into their homes, they feel different, they're more inspired, right? And there's value there. And we see that as the builder, work with good designers, but what you've shown is that when you work with clients, and it may be a small project, as you said, in San Clemente, where you're doing a few bedrooms, but cultivating that relationship now fast forward a couple of years, this is going to steamroll into a big project, with a good budget. And now it's going to set the tone for your career. With other clients, has there been times where a client has pushed back and, resisted maybe Shea's, aesthetic or wanted their own imprint? And how do you handle that, communication with the customer? I know now may be different today as opposed to 7 years ago, but how do you manage through that resistance when a client maybe doesn't fully see your vision?
Yeah, I think honestly, it depends on the client. And I still feel like that to this day. I think that there are some clients who question things because they're just like unsure and there's so much on the line. Like they've spent so much money to build this beautiful custom home and they want it to love it. And they're like, oh, are you sure you like that? And if they're just doing an, are you sure? And I feel sure, then I will say that. But sometimes, and I've learned this over time, there is usually a really good second option. And sometimes our clients are just like, I want to buy this couch. And I'm like, oh, that's not my favorite thing. But you can tell in their voice or how they're approaching it that there's like not really room for pushback. And if that's the case, it's like, you just roll with it. And my job would be to like design around that. But I think that there are also moments when you've developed enough of a relationship with a client where you can really, I think it's all about give and take. So like, if there have been things where they're like, I'm not feeling that paint color in this room. And you say, okay, let's reevaluate. That's okay. It's paint, let's change the cabinet color that we originally presented to something completely different because you want it to feel, moodier in here. And you just give so that like when there's something that you do feel really strongly about, they know that you're serious about that. Because if you're just like the person that's like always pushing back, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's not a good working relationship. I'm not the one living in that house at the end of the day. They are. And so, that's a lesson that I've had to learn over time because I think that some designers are pushier than others. And any time that I've tried to like push too hard throughout the process, it's just not been great. And so I've just had to learn that it's like, for me, it's all about give and take.
I love that you said that. It's funny. There was another designer, she's very adamant that, finishes don't have feelings, right? And it's funny because you alluded to that when you said, usually there's a good second option that sometimes, the client may specifically want this couch or this art piece or whatever it may be. And how do we now incorporate that and design around it? And I've seen that in my business. Some of the best designers and architects I've worked with are ones that don't really have an ego. There's some designers and architects that they want their footprint. They want their mark on every single room, every, part of the home, but the ones that are really successful are the ones that can, really listen to the customer, understand, push in some areas, hold back in others, and really find that balance. So how, going into that, Shea, as you're working through your business, you're building, you're figuring out invoicing, you're, getting systems in place. How do you start to understand your stride? You mentioned the word stride as far as to know this project is a fit for us. This one is not. How do you start understanding so then that way you can quickly vet a lead that comes in?
Unfortunately, I feel like the way you find it is by having bad experiences. Like, you can say, it's easy to set like size requirements and budget requirements early on. Like, we didn't at the very beginning, and we kind of didn't do that for maybe two years. And then we started really tightening down on our parameters. And then we realized, there's a personality component to this too, yes. That like, you're not just, it's a service industry that lasts like, sometimes it's like two or 3 years, these projects, by the time you're working through the architectural plans and you break ground and then you're doing finishes and furniture, like it's a very long relationship. And so sometimes we're just not a good fit. I haven't had that experience very often, maybe just a handful of, just a couple of times, but those really stand out to me when our firm and that client wasn't a good fit, and we learned from it. And so what we do now is I we have a team member who goes through the inquiries, and we set those parameters that are like pretty easy to sift through early on. And then as we're going through the process, like we interview the builder, because usually the builder and the architect are hired before the designer, typically, not always. But then we interview them. What has been the process like so far? Truthfully, what is your working relationship like with this client? And we just have more back and forth so that we can make sure not only are they a good fit for us, but that they're going to be happy with us because we're a good fit for them.
I love that you said that. And I'm going to get back to the interview side, which I think is really important that you're alluding to, Shea. But you made the comment, just in the R&D, the research and development, how important it is, that you're vetting the client as well in the beginning, that you're going to talk to the builder and architect and ask about their process. I'm understanding that right? To understand how the communication's been with the client, how the meetings have been, if they make decisions quickly, if they're easy to work with, because it's such, you were married to them for 2 or 3 years, right?
For real. And also, like, I look through Pinterest boards. Like, I look at the plans of the house, and then I look through, because I want to see what they gravitate towards. If they are pinning things that do not look anything close to what we could produce for them, then I don't think that we're the right designer for them. And that's okay. I'm not offended by that. It's just like, I don't want to transform ourselves. Like, I love to transform within the Studio McGee realm. So we'll do a modern project, we'll do a rustic project, we'll do, just a very like farmhouse project, all over the map. But we kind of morph Studio McGee into those things. But if it's too far off that I just don't like the look, then I'm not going to like promise that to somebody.
I love that you said that, because I think one of the toughest jobs that you have as a designer, Shea, is I've been in meetings with clients where, they want something super modern, right? They keep telling you, I want this modern home, this is modern. And then the pictures they have, and legit, this has happened, are Tuscan, right?
Yeah.
And it's like hand carved cabinetry and heavy base. And you're like, hold on, like.
That's why it's like, give me the Pinterest board, because words are not a good indicator of someone's style, because they will say things to describe their style, and then you go look at their boards and it's not that. And so I think that photos speak a lot louder when it comes to style. So
I love that.
Huge.
And that's one of the advantages now of social media, is that a lot of the clients, they have Pinterest boards, they've been pinning, they have house, and so you can get a sneak peek. So going back to the builder architect, one thing I'm interested, Shay, so you've worked with a lot of builders, locally around the country, a lot of architects, what are some of the attributes, or what are things that they've done to make your job easier? How important is that I shouldn't say client, designer, builder, architect relationship?
Oh, I love this question. That's a good one. I have learned a lot about different builders' processes over the years, and it is fascinating to see the range of how people work. But I will say that a consistent theme through builders that we have good relationships with is that they use some sort of like builder trend, or they use some sort of a weekly update that has like photos and a bullet point list of the things that were going on at the job site. That is good for us, is also great for the client. And it just keeps everyone apprised of what's going on. And it also helps us because in that checklist, it's like, this is what's going on, and then this is what's coming down the pipeline. So we know if there's like any deadlines that need to be, that seem like they're coming a little bit faster than maybe we originally planned for them, so that we can scramble if we need to. I think that's huge. And then having some sort of point person on the job, whether that's a project manager, someone that's there regularly, so that they can call us up or send us pictures, because we do work remotely quite a bit, and also a willingness to figure out how to do something. I think that's that's a mark of a good custom builder, is, we have this idea for this lime wash brick finish. And I've worked with builders who say, well, I can't do that. Like, I don't know. I can't do it. And that was like the answer. I'm like, well, I know it's possible. We just have to figure out how to do it. And then a really good custom builder will say, okay, I'm going to make like 5 mock-ups, and we'll put them on a board, and we'll put them on outside of the house. And we're going to do an exterior mock-up where you can see the metal cladding from the windows, and you can see the siding material, the roof material, all of it kind of just like leaning up against the house, very makeshift, but that helps us visualize. But just that willingness to like try before we give up on it. I think that sometimes there are things that just are not panning out the way we envisioned. It's rare, but a willingness to try is something that I love when working with a custom builder. I also love when they are communicative about how things are brought to life and maybe why something needs to be edited. So designers can do these drawings and conceptualize different things, but like at the end of the day, there's a craftsman working in a workshop to do this special angle on a countertop detail, and maybe it needs to be adjusted a little bit, but explaining to us why it needs to be adjusted helps us then like make the tweaks to get an end result that looks good, instead of us showing up on site and it being completely different than we imagined. But it's like, what happened here? And then they just like decided to cut us out of the process. So those for me, like if I can get all of that in a working relationship with our team and the builder, that's incredible.
No, I love that you said that. It's funny because, having worked with designers on most of our projects, seems to be the constant theme is that, the builders, that I've networked with, that to your point, Shay, that they're going to, if there's a discrepancy in the field, right, or they're going to have to alter something, run it by the designer, right? Make sure the designer's on board and they can adjust. And I love that what you said, don't stonewall, right? If the designer has an inspiration or creativity, or the architect for that matter, don't just say it can't be done, right? Let's find a way to do a mock-up, do different samples and find some construction techniques to now to match that design. And more than anything, you mentioned Builder which we use. I mean, I guess a plug for them here, but what's great about that, I had worked in heavy commercial, before doing high-end residential. One thing that's very common is that organization, right? Daily logs. You're going to go in every day and you're going to update who's on site and the job scope being done, and you're going to take photos. And I emphasize that a lot because I've seen how that's assisted not only our clients, where they can see the progress and who's there, but it does help the designers and it helps that communication. Because the biggest challenge that you have, that I have, is what I've seen to be the downfall, at least for me as the builders. At the end of the day, I'm responsible to build your vision, right, Shay? And what happens is the client will have an expectation of what something will look like. You as a designer, you have your expectation of what it's supposed to look like, and then I have mine. And so I need to make sure that I'm gravitating towards you and the client to make sure that what I'm building now matches that. And how do you bridge that? I think one of the toughest things as a designer is how something's going to look, and the client may think it may look different. How do you, navigate through those expectations with that client, through design and creativity?
Yeah, I think that there are a few points where it's really, really important to have a more detailed representation of what you're designing. So I say kitchens, exterior, master bathroom especially. When we do elevation drawings of every single wall and we do elevations for all of that in CAD, so we have a very good idea of scale. And then we try to get a sample material-wise for every single thing that we're applying. Like if we can get our hands on a chip of stone so that we can get that color and texture, we try to do that. There's going to be something where, a client decides they don't like a tile once they see it, even though you showed them a sample. It happens very rarely and a lot less than if we never showed them a sample
Right.
to begin
Right.
with. So I'd say that drawings and then 3D renderings for us are, we don't do that for every single room of the house, but we do it when the clients really want to visualize. And so we always like to do it for exteriors if possible, if the budget allows. And we really like to do it for spaces where maybe the client's having a hard time making up their minds, so they can see how things come together.
So how often do you get involved in the exterior? I know from a design, I would assume as a designer, you love, of course, interiors kind of your baby, right? You get to design all that, but you would love to have the exterior, collaboration. So
We're pulled into exteriors a lot more than I ever anticipated when I first started getting into design. I would say that it's interesting. Architects operate on really different ways. Like we have some architects who our clients design the plans and then we never speak to the architect again. We're just handed these plans and then it's kind of up to us to interpret. And then we're picking the materials for the outside of the house. And I've had to really research and learn through the years. And now I have a much stronger understanding, feel a lot more comfortable in that realm, but that wasn't where I started with interiors and then, really had to, because the expectation from clients and builders is that the designers are working on the exteriors a lot. And so I had to step up my game and figure it out. And now I love it. But a lot of architects hand the plans over and walk away. Some are involved throughout the entire process, but that's not always the case. And so when we're handed a set of plans, and then we're left to figure out the materials and everything from, this is the soffit and fascia and what the overhang is going to be on the roof line and all of those details that if the architect isn't quite as detailed in their plans.
That's fascinating because I would imagine that's really difficult in the sense that what most people don't realize when you're looking at exterior design, well, now you're looking at rain screens and waterproofing. How does this finish implement that? How's the home going to perform? So it's a whole different, you're dealing with natural elements now. And then for you that's working nationally, right, you're going to work in different climate zones.
Yeah.
So how do you manage, I guess, when you're working through exterior designs throughout the country, how are you managing sourcing some of the product locally? Because some markets just aren't going to have the same thing you have there in Utah.
Right. Sourcing is, I think that it's gotten easier as we're doing more, because our projects are really elevated in their budgets. Like the builder has very good sources. When early on, we were like Googling what the stone yards were in the area, right? And now it's like the builder's like, well, we have good relationships with this quarry and these are showrooms. So then we'll contact the showroom and we'll say, hey, we'll send them inspiration photos and then they'll maybe take a FaceTime through the yard, or we'll do different, well, maybe before COVID, we would fly out there and do, shopping trips, but we rely heavily on the builder and architects when they're long distance projects to and hope that they're sending us the best resources. We know pretty quickly as soon as we start working with that vendor, oh yeah, they know it. They've got a lot of good options. Or sometimes it's oh no, we still need some more. We still need some more vendors to work with.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So one thing I want to get back to, because you spoke about the Sheas, you talked about, now you can see the red flags. You have one way of vetting a customer to say, we have these parameters and that's fine. But one thing I think a lot of us fail to do, and I can relate it to us as a company, is that you want these projects, you want this next one. But the interview process isn't just us interviewing for the project, but it's also us interviewing the customer because, we know that even if it's a trophy home project, if there's going to be difficulty with the client, we just know that there's a personality discrepancy there. How important it is to say, hey, this may not be for me, let's move on. I mean, have you had to do that? How have you gotten better at that over the years?
Yeah, thankfully I'm not the one that has to do that anymore. And honestly, I never, only in the very, very early days. That was one of the things that Sid took on when we joined forces and started Studio McGee. He was really interviewing clients, but Now one of our design director does that. And I think that we go on gut feeling. Like if she doesn't feel good about it, then I do not push on that, because every time I haven't listened to my gut and I've gotten a bad feeling about a project, it's turned out to be not a good relationship. And so if she doesn't feel good, we let them know, like, this isn't going to be a good fit for us. Like, thanks so much. Like, you're so appreciative that someone is attracted enough to your work to even like take the time to write an email and get on the phone with you. Like, the reality is, like, you just need to be so grateful that they were interested in you, but you have to be honest that it's not a good fit. Do we say it's your personality? No. Like, we just say it's not a fit, because the truth is it's not.
Yeah, and it needs to be a win-win. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things is, Sid had joined, business is taking off. I'm sure that at some point you're realizing, hey, this is something that can really be successful. There's some opportunity, the company's building.
Mm-hmm.
How did that decision come into play where now you're operating together and using his background to help build a company?
Yeah. So a plug for our book. We go into detail about that. That launches at the end of October. And I definitely
Awesome.
dive really far into that. We both do. But I would say that, so when Sid started, it was a hard time. It was not like this is going so well for us that like, we're going to have Sid quit his job and join us. He actually, like, I had started and I was very busy, but it was me, and I had an assistant help me when I was like installing projects, and I was doing pretty much everything. And Sid was working for his oldest brother, who's like 15 years older than him, and they had started this digital marketing agency and sold it, and then they were the brother relationship was just getting really tense, and Sid was like, I'm out. I'm done. And didn't really have a plan of like what was supposed to happen next. And so I'm like, oh crap. Like I had a baby, like that. He literally, like, he made this decision, like what I had just had a newborn. And so I was freaking out. I had planned to take time off, like I would give myself a maternity leave at least, and then like slow down. But no, it was like, we have to get back into this. And so while he kind of fumbled through what he was going to do next, I was just like, I got to take on everything I possibly can. So that was when like Instagram really started ramping up for me. So I just like put my head down and like worked and worked and worked and worked. And we were really struggling we had bought this brand new house. I mean, like, we had only been in it a year. I had a new baby, and it was just like, I kept begging him to come work with me. And he was like, I am not working with family ever again. And when there was a time when I'm like, okay, you can at least help me with this stuff. Like, you don't have your next step yet, so you can help me like with behind the scenes work. So he did. And when he like started digging into like how I was operating, he was like, oh my gosh, like, you have, one, you're doing a lot, but two, you really need some help. Because I was like so focused on the design work, like I saved everything to my desktop. I was just like not super like on top of the things that he does best. So he was like blown away. And also the design industry is like, it's just dated. Like, people fax stuff, or they used to. It was just kind of tricky. So he was like, what is this? Like, we can do this so much more efficiently. And so it was kind of around that time that we decided to go into business together. And then that's when we decided to sell our home and then move to Utah. So we used that money that we made from our home to start the business. And so it wasn't like a quick or clear, like, let's go into business. Yeah. It was really messy. And then once we decided to go into business together, like, we were all in. Like, this was like, we were going to do this. Like, it is our dream to build a design brand. And we're going to we needed a fresh start. And so we we came here, and it was a lot less expensive to start a business here. And so
much less than Southern California.
Much less. And so it gave us a longer runway to start our business.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you made some points there, Shay. I think a lot of us can relate because sometimes, with business and, when you're an entrepreneur, sometimes you're born as an entrepreneur naturally, or sometimes, it's out of necessity, right? And sometimes there's a combo of both. And what you look like is, okay, we're trying to fill this gap with our company, but now you dive in and, okay, we're all in. We kind of have our vision now of what we want to do. So speak to one thing in construction is we're very similar, is this kind of dated. A lot of us are not with the times. And you reference builder trend, the successful builders have systems, they have processes, they have organization that really helps us as designers integrate, and I'm sure you've seen your company be extremely successful now that you have systems in place and organization. When did you catch that vision? Because for me, it wasn't until recently, and I wish I would have done that. I wish I'd have done that from day one.
That was like Sid's role very early on, and he is truly behind the success of our ability to scale, because for me, I have a vision, a creative vision, and I love design, but he was very quick to say you are not scalable, Shay, you are not so we've got to figure out how to scale this. And ultimately he really laid the foundation for putting systems and processes together. And that was early on. And I really think that that's been a huge part of our success. And it's only built upon there as we've grown our team. And now we have people who really, really help fulfill that role. But yeah, I think that just even how we organize ordering and how we are organizing, even the process of first you send mood boards, then we do finishes, then we do furniture, even just figuring out that helps, instead of just having even the creative process needs to have some process.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that you said that. It's funny because from a design perspective, yeah, there's some organization where here's our contract, here's our fee, whatever that may be. How do we break it up in phases? And then what's determined in each phase? And, the more information you have for the customer, where I've seen challenges in that relationship, even for me as a builder, is if I don't have a good idea of my billing, and how that's broken out, or the designer maybe is doing hourly instead of a lump sum that's phased out, sometimes things can be interpreted differently. And so it really helps the expectations to manage the process from a financial perspective too.
Yeah, definitely.
So Shay, one question as we kind of move this conversation, one thing that fascinates me. So throughout social media, and just a plug for you, is that I see your projects all the time, right? People are reposting Studio McGee. It's, you're the leader, you're posting stuff that's breathtaking and that's new and setting that tone for the industry where people are getting inspiration. I have clients coming to my office with your photos that they want us to do something similar.
Yeah.
So where are you finding inspiration? How do you continue to stretch and, as a company to continue that vision?
I think there's a couple of different ways. And for me, I get tired of things. So I have learned what I never get tired of. And then there are things that I get tired of. And so there's some consistency. I love a Calcutta marble and I love an unlacquered brass. That's probably not something that I'm going to be over in 2 years. So there's a few things that are always consistent. I love a fresh and classic style, but I think that colors kind of ebb and flow. We were really into cool grays for a while. Now we're into warm grays and beiges. And we just kind of, I think that by my nature of getting a little tired of things, when our designers come to me and they're showing me things that I've seen before, I'm this feels like something I've seen. So let's push here. And my role as as chief creative officer, but as creative director in the design team, we have design leaders. So they're lead designers and they are managing the project. But my job is to push the design. My whole responsibility for the company is to set the vision for where we're going. And So we kick off the project and we comb through our clients' mood boards and we look at images. And so then I can hand pick the ones that feel the freshest to me. Like, oh, they put this picture on their board that looks like a bathroom that could have been designed like 6 years ago. Let's not pick that as the direction to go. But they picked this bathroom here, and I feel like we've got something like in the way it feels. And so we take it, and then I say, hey, I feel like I've seen this. I feel like I've seen this. Why don't we try? I've been really into, rough stone materials where it was like very clean for a while. And I just think that like you kind of like transition your design's taste over the years, but then there are some consistence. And I think that constantly pushing yourself and your team in a good way, it keeps us feeling fresh. And then I also think that giving yourself a moment to like step away from a computer.
Yeah.
So I'm so sad that travel isn't really an option because
Right.
like I just love like getting away from my computer and taking a trip and walking around and going just, I don't even care if it's like a hike in the mountains or if it's in a new city. It's just like a moment to step away, clears your head enough to like, when you come back to it, you just have fresher ideas.
Well, it's interesting you said that because from a design or for me as a construction background, as I travel and I'm in different parts of the country or outside of our country, it's amazing the inspirations you see things, techniques and styles that have held the test of time, right? From construction methods or design, and I'm sure you draw inspiration. And so with that, without getting into all the secrets, right, at Studio McGee, as you're looking through design, you had mentioned like Carrera marble, something I loved. Is there a strategy where you're looking at, okay, if I'm looking at the kitchen, I may do like a Carrera marble because it's timeless at the island. It's hard to replace. So from a construction perspective, it's costly to replace. But maybe we have fun with the backsplash that we can replace or other elements. Or maybe we get a little eccentric, in the powder bath or laundry room, some areas of the home we have fun. I mean, is there any strategy to that as well?
Yeah, I'm a classicist when it comes to finishes because I just like, they're so hard. I just feel like I don't want to go into a house and be like, oh yeah, I remember when that type of backsplash was cool.
Right.
And so I think that everything changes over time, but there are some things that have more staying power than others. And so I think where you can keep things interesting is like details, but also like the furniture is so much easier to transition in and out. So like colors in your textiles, whether that's like a rug or pillows, the artwork even, I would rather try the funkier things that way. And we're not funky designers, but like that's to me where I would push. I don't, it's funny because I am actually usually having to talk clients out of trendy things because they will come to me and they'll see something on Instagram or they'll see something on Pinterest and they're like, isn't this cool? And I'm like, it's cool, but you're not going to like it in 2 years. And so I have to kind of
Reel them in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting because you alluded to this early in the conversation where here in Laguna, there was a trend that Tuscan, that heavy dark finish, and that you were doing this white and bright. And it's funny because as a kid, or I shouldn't say as a kid, but as a teenager, I grew up in San Diego and I worked as an electrician in Coronado. And some of these old homes, 70, 80-year-old homes, they're in Coronado and they're white kitchens, a lot of natural light, brass, a lot of brass. And people tell me, hey, white kitchens, that's right now. And I'm like, well, white kitchens, and brass have been around a long time. And it's something that's stayed true over years. And so really it's about, finding these things that are timeless, and through travel, through other experiences, I'm sure as you alluded to, that's how you're going to continue to refine that design process.
Yeah. And I think that also like Tuscany is beautiful, but the way it was watered down and then replicated a million times over is when it lost all of its luster.
Charm.
And there was no authenticity to it. It wasn't about finding a beautiful stone sink that was reclaimed. It was just like, oh, to get the Tuscan look, we do travertine tile, we do dark brown cabinets, and then we do brushed nickel knobs, right? And that was like the same thing in every single house. And so, and maybe they get like a faux paint on the walls or something somewhere. And I think that if you're staying true to like authentic materials, that's when you will start to see a more timeless look in a home.
Well, I love that, Shay. And, as being sensitive to your time here. So with, having designed over 300 projects and the success you had in the design world, what made you come up with the concept or idea to now let's launch into other media realms, and collaborations as well as your own product line? How did that kind of take its form?
Yeah. So really early on, like Sid and I actually thought that we were going to, knowing his digital marketing background, like we thought that we were going to launch like a store, online store at the same time as we launched our design firm. That did not happen. We got turned down by so many vendors because they didn't think that we could sell anything on the internet. They didn't believe that was like a real business model. And so we had to prove ourselves. And so we did. We had to wait and prove ourselves in the design world before then we could launch McGee Co. But it was always a plan to do something more scalable because design services just aren't scalable. Mm-hmm. If you do them the way that we like to do them, which is not replicating designs, and I like to be involved in the projects. And so we can only take on a certain amount of projects. If we were going to grow our business, we had to do something that we could do at scale, and product was that. And I also you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. And so if all of our eggs were in the Instagram basket, what if something happened to Instagram and then that was no longer cool? You want to make sure you've got your blog going and you have Pinterest and YouTube, so you can diversify where people are finding you. With McGee Co. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just say diversification. I mean, you said that. I mean, that is so key to any business, and so you've done that. So yeah, speak about McGee Co.
Yeah, and so McGee Co. I mean, it is the larger side of our business, and we intentionally keep Studio McGee to a certain kind of size so that we can maintain a high standard of work in the design work, and then McGee Co. continues to grow very rapidly, and I am loving the new challenge of designing new product, and it's still very much in the design world, but it's a new challenge. And I am really glad that we went for it because we didn't know exactly what we were getting ourselves into. We put all of our products on a few shelves in the basement when we first launched, and started going crazy, and then we had to figure out warehousing. It was a lot. It's been a lot over the years. But that I mean just diversifying your social accounts. Mm-hmm. I think that diversifying your revenue streams is also really important to growing your business.
Oh, I love that, Shay. That's great. Words of wisdom for anyone listening is the diversification that even though you're diversified between these social channels, product lines, and design and everything else, but there's still a theme here. There's still an authenticity. There's still a style, a consistency that reaches where they know it's your style. They know that it's your product, and you're mm-hmm. keeping that consistent. So, what's next? What are you excited about that's upcoming? Besides your book, you announced your book coming out in October.
Yeah, the book's coming out in October, and we have our next Target launch. So we are. It's a collaboration that we've been doing with. We launched our first one in the spring. It sold out very, very quickly, and so I haven't really been able to talk about it for the last little bit because there's no product to show right now, but it's coming. We signed a multi-year partnership with them. So in the early fall, we will launch another collection that we've been working on, and it's awesome. And it's incredible, the level of design that we've been able to create, and then they're able to provide it for such a good price point. It's such a good value. So I'm very excited about our next Target launch. And then we have one other top secret project that I can't officially announce, but it's something that we've been working on for the past year that will also launch in October. And it's going to be maybe our biggest project yet. It took 108 of my days in the last 108 of my days since last August. So wow. It's a big project.
Well, I think I know what that is, but I won't tell our customers.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but that's super exciting. And we'll kind of dangle those carrots out for the
Yeah.
listeners and through the social media, and especially with your book coming. So again, and Shay, where can our listeners find you?
Sid's walking back
Yeah,
here.
I love Sid seeing our
So you can find us on Instagram at Studio McGee and also on McGee Co. And then you can find us on YouTube at Studio McGee. And I think that our blog is Studio-McGee, and you can shop all our products at McGeeandCo.com.
Well, you're amazing. I can't thank you enough for making time, Shay, and sharing this amazing wisdom and advice and, just the history of your company and what you built. So thank you very much.
This was fun. Thanks for having me.